Hello, everyone following us on this very interesting series of events to mark the anniversary of the Translators Teacher Association. I'm very, very pleased to be part of this and feel honored. In DGT, as we call the Directorate General for Translation in the European Commission, in short, DGT, I coordinate the network of the European Masters in Translation, which is a network of universities. In this function, I naturally have a lot of contacts with translation teachers all over Europe. And I'm quite familiar with the context of translator training in the universities, and also with the efforts it sometimes takes to make translation studies be recognized as an academic field of studies. So we always welcome initiatives like yours to give translation and translator training in particular a bit more visibility. And you will see that the goals of your association, which I must admit I wasn't aware about until I received the invitation, but the goals of your associations the goals are quite similar to the goals of the EMT, which I'm going to present to you. And let me only quickly share my screen now with you so that you can follow.
Yes, it's okay. Mm-hmm.
It's okay? Voila.
Voila.
This is how it should look like. Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about the European Masters in Translation primarily, but to start with, I just wanted to give you the context because, as I said, I work for DG Translation in the European Commission, and our original, and not original, but our main task is, of course, translating for the European Union of all the legislation, all the guidelines, all the recommendation that the European Commission formulates for the citizens of the European Union. And in order to make these legislation understood by the member states and by its citizens, we translate and provide the translation into all of the 24 European official languages. But as the biggest translation service in the world, we feel that it is important to also give translation a bit of visibility outside the Commission. And that's why we have started to develop a couple of outreach activities to give visibility to the translation profession, which very often happens in the background, as we all know. So for instance, we have, as you can see here, Juvenes Translatores, which is a translation competition for school children or young high school pupils. We have the Translating Europe initiative. Here, the logo is here, which is a big annual conference where we gather all the stakeholders of the translation sector once a year, but we also have regional events in the member states under the same logo. And we also reach out to the general public on the European Day of Languages on the 26th of September each year, where we try to promote multilingualism and in particular also the importance of translation in this multilingual societies that the European Union lives in. And of course, we have contacts with the universities, mainly through the European Masters in Translation, which I said have the pleasure to coordinate in the Commission. So the European Masters in Translation is actually two things. First of all, it's a quality label, the logo of which you can see here. It's a quality label that the DG Translation awards to programs, study programs in translation at master's level that meet certain standards and criteria, quality criteria. I will talk about these criteria later on, but to explain you the procedure and how it works. So these programs that are awarded the label are invited to join the network of the European Masters. And we do this on the basis of a call that we organize every 2 years. The last selection round took place last year, so we just renewed the network recently. And this is how it looks like. Let me see. Nowadays, we have 81 universities in the program, most of them in the countries of the European Union, but also 16 universities from countries outside the European Union, in the UK, in Switzerland, and even in Lebanon, because not only EU countries can apply for membership, also countries that are in neighboring the European Union. So we try to reach out beyond. And this is what the European network looks like if you look at the geographical coverage and the membership. But what are exactly the objectives of the network? And first of all, it is, of course, to improve the quality of the translator training in order to enhance the labor market integration of young translation professionals. And we hope that in the long run, by delivering high qualified translators to the markets, this training initiative will also help to give more recognition to the translation profession as a whole. And you may ask yourselves, okay, these are nice goals, but how do you achieve them? And it's a very relevant question, because in the EMT, we do not have one common curriculum. This is important to stress. We have in the European Union various educational systems and various traditions, and it was important for the European member states that they can keep on working and functioning according to these educational systems. And the European Commission has no competence in education policy. It's up to the member states to define these. And that's why when we started to set up the EMT network over 10 years ago, the experts that we consulted, who were all renowned professors for translation studies, they took the wise decision not to try to design a common curriculum, but to express the training objectives in terms of the competences that need to be acquired by the students at the end of their training. And they defined these in the first competence document, Competence Profile, which you may remember being represented by the EMT wheel. Some of you may have come across this. The Competence Profile then defined the basic skills that young graduates need to develop or need to acquire when they enter the market. And they've been defined as these competences in here: language competence, intercultural competence, information mining, and so on. These are still valid, but after almost 10 years, the professors in the EMT network felt that it was time to review these competences and the document as such, because we have all witnessed lots of changes that have affected both the language industry, but also the European universities. And that's why, and also they considered that there have been lots of changes on the market itself. There were new translation products that were demanded, which didn't exist before, such as audiovisual translation, post-editing. All this is, of course, linked to the developments on the technology side. We all know that there have been huge developments and progress as far as translation tools are concerned, and machine translation in particular, when we think of neural machine translation. And of course, the education sector itself has seen many changes. If you think now, it's not the traditional classroom training any longer. Lots of blended learning, virtual learning environments are now almost common use. And you know that there's been a recent push with the pandemic of the coronavirus, which made all of the teachers now switch to online training. But this was already foreseeable a bit, and that's why they teachers and the network decided to adapt the former document, also to respond to some criticism to this former document, which contained too little of the actual translation competence. It was mentioned, but too implicitly. And of course, it had too much detail and repetition. And that's how they decided to, or why, not how, why they decided to review the document. And they came up with this new competences framework 2017. As you can see, the visual representation has changed from one big wheel, oops, where is my mouse? Here. From one big wheel into several cogwheels, all linked with each other. And if you're interested in the details, I'm quickly going through the competences now, but if you're interested in the details, you can download the document under this address here on our webpage. It's available in English, French, and German. Now, what has changed compared to the former document? First, you will see, as I said, it was a bit streamlined and refined. So instead of 7 competences as before, we now have 5 complementary areas with 35 sub-skills in here compared to 48 sub-skills in the past. So this was to get rid of redundancies. And there is explicit references now to post-editing and machine translation. And other changes concern these competences. We have here, first of all, as a start, as before, the language competence. It still is there, but what has changed is that professors in the EMT network consider that on a master's level, language training should be a prerequisite. Master's programs should not concentrate on language teaching any longer. Students that enter a master's program should have already a high level of language competences in at least 2 working languages, and the programs should check that their students have this required competence. And we use as a reference the competence framework for European languages, and we consider that level C1 or above should be at least required for students entering a master's. And of course, they should try to perfect their language skills, but the training should rather concentrate on the other competences, which are, of course, as I said, the central competence is the translation competence, which is now explicitly mentioned and given the prominence that it deserves. And what you had formerly as thematic competence and information mining competence is now integrated and listed under the skills under the translation competence. So they are not forgotten, but they have been integrated under this translation competence. And of course, there is a reference to machine translation and post-editing also mentioned under this competence. We still have the technology-based competence. It becomes more and more central, as we all know, with the progress of the translation tools, as I said before. And it focuses mainly on all the skills that the students should possess so that they can use the translation tools within the translation process. And it also includes basic knowledge of machine translation technologies. What is rather new as well is the explicit mention of personal interpersonal skills. They have been in the former module as well included, but only implicitly. And the experts in the EMT network felt that it was important to stress that students need these personal, interpersonal, or very often referred to as soft skills. In particular, they need to be able to work in collaborative and multicultural environments. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of these competences. You can read them later on in the document itself. The last competence that was considered crucial, and it has been there from the beginning, is the service provision competence. So students leaving a master's program should be aware of the client's needs and demands. They should be able to negotiate with the client's deadlines and rates, invoicing and things like that. Be able to organize the translation project as such, and of course comply with all the professional ethical codes and standards. So this is, as I said, the basis and the core of the EMT network. Programs that want to become part of the network need to show and demonstrate that they do cover all these competences in their training. As I said before, there are many ways of getting there. All the methods are left over to the programs, but the outcome is important. The outcome should be at least what is mentioned in this framework. And the EMT members are required or invited to adapt their ways of training to the changing market needs constantly. And this is why the membership is limited to 5 years, because we want them not to sleep on their laurels and say, oh, now we are in the EMT network. No, we would like them to really reflect constantly. Do we really cover, do we meet the needs of the market and of the profession nowadays? And to help them achieve this, we invite them to cooperate actively. And that's why we, this is the only thing that we do actually in the Commission, is we provide them a platform where they can meet. We have at least 2 network meetings per year, where we invite them to discuss openly best practices, exchange new methods for teaching. And they do this they do this actively. Before, at the very beginning, they were maybe a bit shying away or were not doing this too openly by fear that they might disclose too much of their competences to their competitors, because universities are also competing for the students. But very soon they realized that actually each program is different. Each program has its own strength, its own specialization, and it's by trying to see how others cope with the new challenges, they actually get stronger. And it really works very well, this cooperation. And of course, the universities do all this also in close cooperation with the language industry, because it's with these contacts of the industry that the programs discover which are actually the demands of the market. And, oops, sorry, I clicked on the wrong button, which are the demands of the market and which are the latest developments as regards of tools which are used in the market, because they also try to contact tool developers and cooperate with them. And of course, also in terms of traineeships, they have close ties to the language industry so that they can send their students to meaningful traineeships. Yeah, so this was really in a hurry. And very briefly, the main objectives of the EMT. the main criteria or competences that we think are crucial for the translator training. And you can read this, as I said, on the EMT pages of the European Commission. And if you have further questions, you can ask me now, or can send also an email to the mailbox or functional mailbox, which I included here on the last slide, where we are happy to answer all the questions.
How do universities receive the mark that they have the standard? Is the procedure, what is assessed? What parameters?
The parameters, actually we developed, how you call this, a procedure by which we invite professors from the EMT, but also from outside, to help us evaluate the files that are sent in to us. And of course, the files are not, they have to meet certain or respect certain norms. So we have delivered a full questionnaire that the universities have to fill in. It's a bit lighter than an accreditation thing, but it's more or less, yeah, it's more or less these kind of things. So we ask not only how they fulfill or how they try to meet the objectives or meet how they try to cover, the competences that I just mentioned in the training. But they also have to explain how many teachers they employ, what is the mix of staff, is it academics, or is it are there also practitioners involved in the training, what are the relations to the industry, what is the position of research in the program, and all this has to be answered in this questionnaire, and always supported by proof, by evidence. So there is always a part where the program can describe a bit in own words how they, the strategy, so to speak.
Yeah, so some checked parameters, yeah?
Yeah, they are checked, of course, and they are checked by professors.
Okay, and another question, you said that you provide the platform for meeting those people, those universities that are involved in EMT. Can outsiders get in? I mean, from Russia?
Yes, yes. As I said, it is mainly a European network, so European, I mean European Union network, but countries, universities located in countries which are not part of the European Union can also apply for membership. There are slightly different rules, so they can participate, but they cannot vote for the EMT board, which is the governing body, but they can participate in all the activities.
We just, I mean, my idea was how can we start communicating so that we find the way of maybe some mutual projects in the future. And if you said that there is a platform where they communicate, maybe some of us can come and say, well, we are doing this thing, and maybe you would recommend us something to improve.
What is a possibility before even joining the network as a full member is to cooperate with universities on a bilateral basis on certain projects. So universities, or even on projects which the idea may start within the EMT network, but very often they invite other partners, other partner universities from outside the network to collaborate with them. I'm thinking now of a project run by the University of Ljubljana, for instance, on training migrants in translation, or in translation from languages which are not languages of the European Union, for instance, and they do cooperate also with universities that are not in the network. So if we could start, for instance, with having a list of your members, and we could provide that to our network members, and if they are interested in some projects that you do, or if they propose a project and your universities, one of the universities of your network has the competence in that particular field, it is absolutely realistic that they would try to reach out to you and invite you to cooperate in that project.
Well, I'm a representative of a quite young university in this respect, and we are not doing much. We are just trying to find the way to research and join in, but I'm sure that our colleagues from better standing universities may join in somehow, and we will follow the lead.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that there is also cooperation, of course, for departments that offer Russian. Of course, we in the European Union, as Russian is not an official language of the European Union, we sometimes lose this out of sight, but the universities don't. So there are a lot of universities in our network that do have Russian in their language combination, and they are, of course, always eager to find partners for cooperation, for teacher exchange or student exchanges. All this is something that they are, of course, also interested.
Yeah, well, cooperation starts by small steps.
Yes.
We are looking for those small steps to start.
Exactly. And so are we. And so even if for the moment it will not be possible to make to accept new members because the call was just closed, but cooperation can start before. And for us, I talk for the full network, for the whole network. It's also nice to reach out beyond Europe, because we are convinced that the criteria and the quality criteria that we have defined are universal. And the more universities apply them in translator training, the better it would be for the profession. And so, yes, by all means, I will communicate to the network that I have participated in today's session, and that we have made first contacts, and invite them to cooperate with the universities of your network.
Okay, thank you. The question on the Facebook, where can we find those questionnaire that you mentioned?
Oh, it's not online for the moment. There is a new questionnaire for each selection round, because we try to adapt to the, as I said, to the needs of them.
Or some other person.
But they will be, actually, they will be published on the web pages of the EMT project. So this is where you can find everything which I explained now, including the document, the competence framework, and also the basic selection criteria. The documents for application are not online right now, but I think the general criteria are well explained there.
Okay, do you evaluate only the master programs or the bachelor programs as well?
No, only the master programs.
Master programs.
And well, sometimes because of the varying teaching systems, a lot of the training on competences that I just explained briefly happens already at bachelor degree in many programs. And of course, in that case, it is important that master programs that apply refer to the training that they have given in the previous stage. So in that case, yes, we do evaluate, but it's not, the label is for the master's programs.
And are there any studies to follow the future career of the students prepared on this
Yes,
program?
of course. Oh, this is a very good question, which I forgot to mention. This is also part of the application, because we want to see that the programs are aware of the market relevance of their program, and try to see and follow up the path of their graduates, whether they find a job easily, whether it is in translation or a related profession. And yes, we do ask this.
Yeah, I have a question about your program. Is your program mostly aimed on interpreting or on translation, or for both? Like your master's program mostly educate our interpreters for simultaneous, comprehensive, and so on types of translation and interpreting, or on writing translation too?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, the network is, as I said, the EMT is not a program as such. It's a network of universities that offer study programs in translation, mainly. So this is our main concern. But there are, of course, in the network also programs that teach both. So they have translation and interpreting. But this is not a prerequisite. So we concentrate on translation only, actually, with the competences. And if there are programs that also have an interpreting strand, that's fine. But this will not be evaluated in our assessment, in our selection procedure. So if I may perhaps ask a question about your association, because it's called Translation Teachers Association, but you said that you also have language service providers as members.
Yes, as members, yes.
Okay.
But they also do some teaching job. They teach our students, they come to universities, they share experience, they try to strengthen the communication between the industry and the universities, because otherwise, what do we work for? We work for the industry, we prepare specialists. And if the industry doesn't get in touch, then our efforts are useless. But fortunately, so many of language service providers are eager to cooperate and invite students for internships and give lecture, describe, enlighten us. Thank them for this. I'm very grateful to all the industry representatives for that.
Yes. Yes, as I said, for us it's crucial as well that we have contacts with the industry. We do not have them as members in the EMT network, but
as partners.
We have them as partners. Yes, we have also contacts with associations, of course, language industry associations, and all the programs do have on the local level, of course, contacts to language service providers for the same reason, because it's a symbiosis, I would say. You have to, and we are thankful for the input, or the universities are thankful for the input they get from the language service providers, but I think it's also in the interest of the language service providers to have contact with the universities, so because they will hire they will recruit their graduates at a time, and if they know what is happening at the universities, it's always useful for them.
Quite agree with you, absolutely.
And
LSP, they are eager to hire good, well-prepared students, graduates, right? Who can work already, and this is why they suggest that we should teach them this or that skills, those, so that we could try to figure what should we teach actually. So the depth somehow.
Yes. So we are on the same wavelength there. What I find very important sometimes is that language service providers also understand that it's not a university's task to produce graduates that are immediately operational. Absolutely. It is, universities can equip them with the basic skills, and then they can raise awareness for a certain mindset that they will be always curious to learn, and that they will have to, I think it's true for all the professions, but in particular for translation, you have to keep on learning. This lifelong learning concept is really so crucial. And if you manage to give or raise this awareness among your students and then future graduates, that is what you should expect as a language service provider. But the language service providers also have to give the new recruits some time and to also contribute to the learning on the job. So they cannot expect universities to deliver them graduates that are immediately operational as a translator with several years of experience.
Sure.
Yes.
This is sometimes a struggle, I can see.
And sometimes it's struggle to get the clients of those LSP understand what the translators should do and what they shouldn't do, what they're supposed to be doing and what not.
Yes, yes, I fully agree. This is the biggest difficulty, to somehow educate the clients and make this understood, what a translator can do, and that it's not only that it requires certain skills that you need to pay a certain price, otherwise qualified translators who have gone through all this training will not accept. And yeah, so this is really something where we are still looking for good ideas, yeah, to make this understood by the clients, by the end clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this respect, Natalia just mentions that yesterday we were discussing the recommendations that were worked out in cooperation between the universities and LSP providers, language service providers, for the internship, for the organization of students' internship. So we are working on a document which would recommend what should universities be preferably doing about this, how can the agencies be preparing, and
students as well.
Students
yes.
as well. So
yeah.
many parties involved in this complex communication process, I believe.
Yes.
And how to make it go smoother than it goes now.
Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. This is, we did the same. We have also some kind of memorandum of understanding on quality traineeships as well. And also to make the companies understand that trainees are not a cheap workforce. They are there to learn something. And so it's a giving and a taking, but it's in the interest of both parties. And yeah. We had the same experience and
same wavelength, as you said.
Yes, as you see, and yeah, and that's why I think it's important to reach out. As I said, it's a European Union project in the beginning, but we are open to cooperate beyond the European Union.
That's great news.
That's great.
So I will definitely share all the information I received about your association with the EMT partners.
And we stay in contact.
And yes, yeah, and we will stay in touch, that's for sure.
Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
Okay.